Hi all, welcome to our webinar series. Thank you very much for taking your time out to attend this important session today. As always, I'm very excited to bring the best of the best to share their thoughts and wisdom in front of you. Today we will be covering alternative equity. Uh, Many of you know, at least I can see some veterans in the audience. Alternative investment funds, they have been among the fastest growing asset class categories in India. A set of very highly skilled and knowledgeable people are making this happen. And I'm delighted and grateful to have with us today Nalin Muniz. Nalin, as I know him, he's a very passionate believer in everything he does, be it investing or running full marathon or his latest, doing an Ironman. Nalin has been a veteran. I think now he's been over 15, 20 years, 15 years at least in the investing profession in India. Currently, he's at Edelweiss Asset Management. He leads their research and portfolio management functions for alternative equity funds across AIF, PIF, PMS, and offshore platforms. And this is in addition to being the fund manager for the Edelweiss Alternative Equity Scheme. Nalin has, you may have looked at his bio, he's earned multiple awards and accolades. Importantly, Nalin and his entire family have been contributing in big ways to CFA Institute's work in India. We are eternally grateful to you, Nalin, and your family. Now, before we begin, just a few housekeeping instructions. The webinar, as many of you know, it's slotted for 60 minutes. We may just go over it, but our aim is to finish it within 60 minutes, including the Q&A. We'll be having time for the Q&A after the presentation, but if there is something that is very pressing, and in any case, do keep on putting the questions on the Q&A box, which is there at the bottom of your viewer. The webinar presentation, it will be available, and thank you, Nalin, for you to view after the presentation concludes. The link, Harshad will be sharing the link in the chat box. Importantly, we value your feedback very much, so please complete the evaluation survey before you sign off, and do write to us in terms of speakers that you would like to have or any other suggestions in ways we could improve this offering to you. Now, without further ado, let me pass it on to Nalin Muniz. There's a lot of questions. Some of you have actually given me questions beforehand as well. But I'm sure we'll try to do justice to all questions before the hour ends. Over to you, Nalin. Thank you so very much and welcome to the session.
Thank you, Srinivas. A warm good evening to everybody. And you've scared me now saying that people are already sending in questions. Thank you for also highlighting that I am a marathon runner and an aspiring Ironman. And, I think this picture, which is on your screen, is actually from 5 years ago. But, I've seen a lot of change personally in the last 5 years through running and doing triathlon. And that is also some of the big underlying mantra that I'm going to talk about today evening, about how Indian financial markets are changing and evolving. So let's get started. So just a quick overview of today's agenda. We are going to do this in 4 parts. We're going to start by talking about one of perhaps the most important mega trends in equity fund management. Then, as we talk about what is alternative equity, I'll tell you a little bit about who the players are and what it takes to succeed. I'll leave you with 2 very interesting thought experiments in investing and risk management that are also related to the CFA curriculum. And then lastly, we'll wrap up by talking about some of the future trends for this nascent and exciting industry. So the big mega trend that I'm going to talk to you about first today is the separation of alpha or outperformance, and beta or market returns. And this is something that has been happening globally, but has also accelerated in India in the last 3 to 5 years. So let's look at some interesting data from the mutual fund industry and looking at the equity schemes that are run today. We have done an analysis of approximately 220 mutual fund schemes covering about 9 lakh crores of total AUM across these 8 traditional long only asset classes. I'll explain the color coding in just a second. Just a minute, please. Okay. Each of these categories has, approximately 30 odd schemes. So they're very well represented. And what's interesting is that if you look at the performance of the last 3 years, there is very, very little alpha that is being delivered by fund houses. The problem is most problematic in the categories that are red. It is perhaps cyclically out of favor in categories like amber, and in the green categories, so the mid and small cap categories, funds are still being able to generate alpha. And there are multiple reasons for this, including greater availability of information, the move to total return benchmarks, very tight scheme classifications announced by SEBI in 2018, and a number of other factors at play. But very clearly, over the last 3 years, alpha or outperformance among long only mutual funds is shrinking. And this is not a trend that is new. It's actually been shrinking for a while. So if you look at the 4 red categories, you'll see that the percentage of schemes and the percentage of AUM that is outperforming has been dwindling over a period of time. I was shocked to realize that out of 33 large cap schemes, in the last 3 years, only 2 funds have actually been able to beat the Nifty net of fees, which is a staggering number. In the amber categories, there is a temporary dip in outperformance, but we think that could come back in the future as mid and small caps outperform large caps when the cycle turns. And lastly, in the 2 green categories, which is the mid and small cap space, because of the information asymmetry and illiquidity, there is still value that fund managers are adding today. So let's try and understand what is the primary culprit for this driver of underperformance. We spoke about some things like total return benchmarking or scheme classification or more analyst coverage, but actually it is the style in which portfolios are being managed that are the core reason for fund performance to dwindle. There are 2 core reasons. There are 2 ways in which portfolios are being managed that are leading to shrinking alpha. The first is that even though people are investing for a long term, retail investors are running about 8,000 crores of SIPs every month, the average holding period for an equity mutual fund is hovering only at about 1.5 years. And they are very much hugging the benchmark in terms of stock weights, sector weights, and diversification across 60 to 80 holdings. We measure this by looking at the active share. You could also measure this by looking at the tracking error of portfolios but we think the active share is a much simpler and robust metric to analyze how close somebody is to a benchmark. And this is true across funds, across categories. Holding periods are very, very low, and active shares are only hovering at around 35%. An interesting anecdote from the global markets is that the European regulator under the UCITS guidelines has actually said today that if you want to be classified as an active fund, you need to necessarily maintain at least a 50% active share, which means that at least half your portfolio has to be different from the benchmark. If the European regulator was running the Indian capital markets, almost no equity mutual fund would classify as an active fund. We have an industry of closet indexers today. And this dwindling alpha and the fact that portfolios are being managed in a closet indexing manner is driving a very, very sharp separation between alternatives or alpha and ETFs and index funds or beta. Here are the AUMs of the equity mutual fund industry in red, ETFs and index funds in amber, and then what we classify as alternative equity in green. I think that this chart is actually very, very powerful because this says that out of all the domestic equity AUM, about 50% is in active funds, but 25% is in ETFs or index funds, and 25% is in equity alternatives. Globally, this mix is somewhere between 40% active, 40% ETF index funds, and 20% alternatives. So the reality is that we may think that India has a long way to emerge, but we are actually far closer to global averages in terms of the split between active, passive, and alternatives than one may think. And this mix is only accelerating. Over the last 5 years, while active equity mutual funds have grown at about 17% per year, ETFs and index funds have grown at 72% on a compounded basis. Now, this has primarily been driven by a lot of flows from EPFO, but it is very much a trend that is here to stay. And alternatives, which we're going to talk about in more depth, have grown at 35% year on year in the last 5 years. The growth rates are absolutely staggering. What do we mean by alternative equity? We're going to talk about 3 categories today, including discretionary equity PMS, which is at about 1.25 lakh crores, category 3 AIFs, which are at about 50,000 crores, and then category 2 AIF equity funds, which are at about 40,000 crores today. And each of these categories are also growing rapidly. The growth rate of category 2 AIF equity is actually not available because this is something that was created in the last 5 years. But needless to say that each of these 3 buckets are growing very, very fast and in a secular and broad-based manner. So now let's dive into what do we mean by alternative equity and who are the players in this space. So when I think of alternative equity as a business head and CIO, I really think of 2 words, which are unconstrained investing. We spoke about in the previous section how mutual funds by design or by decision are running in a very, very constrained and index oriented manner. And here we're trying to break the shackles on the constraints that mutual funds have. What do we mean by constraints? I really think of constraints along 4 dimensions. The first is the use of leverage and shorting. Equity mutual funds are only investing to the extent of 100% of AUM, and they are long only. If you relax both of these 2 constraints through the category 3 AIF format, you get 2 alternative strategies, which is equity long short and 130-30, which is a more popular strategy globally. The other dimension of constraint is diversification versus concentration. And if we move from a 60 to 80 stock portfolio to 20 to 25 stocks, you get focused or thematic portfolios, which are very popular among the PMS arena. The third element of constraint is your time horizon. Most mutual funds are investing with a 1 to 1.5 year time frame. And you can either go shorter, in which case you get quant trading and high frequency trading, or you can go much longer and start investing in listed businesses with a private equity mindset, or what is called PIPE. Okay, so changing the time horizon relaxes the constraint that we face. And lastly, equity mutual funds are only investing in listed equities. We can relax that constraint as well, either to invest in credit like capital solution funds, either to invest in unlisted securities like crossover funds, or to even invest in things like commodities through managed futures. So this is the framework and canvas with which we look at the alternative equity space. Now let me tell you who are the big players in the alternative equity space. And let's start with the pure listed players. The first is focused, people who run focused portfolios. This has approximately 1 lakh crores of AUM as on date. And the big players include people like ASK, Motilal, Alchemy, Inam, as well as some of the more up and coming boutiques like White Oak, Marcellus, Old Bridge, and others that are run by former star fund managers from the mutual fund industry. Thematic portfolios are about half that size, about 50,000 crores. And this is again run by people like IIFL, Unify, Axis Mutual Fund, ICICI Prudential Mutual Fund, and others. And lastly, we have the long short category, which is actually a fairly new space, maybe around 5 to 6 years old. And it is about 10,000 crores of AUM today. And this is, the market leaders are people like Avendus, Edelweiss, DSP, and others. What does it take to succeed in each of these 3 arenas? Typically, focused portfolios have focused on really high quality businesses, the HDFC banks, the Asian Paints, the Pidilites of the world. And they've been focused on long-term compounding businesses. The thematic space is about innovation, tactical ideas, spotting the next macroeconomic trend. And this is where great ideation about cycles and market opportunities is critical to do well. And the long short space, I think, is very interesting because it requires not only a knowledge of stock picking, but also derivatives, risk management, and market microstructure to do very well. Now let's come to the market leaders in the not in the pure listed space, in the cross asset class arena. First, we have Pipe, and here players like Nalanda, which is run by Pulak Prasad, or Malabar or Amansa are some of the largest players. Here, I think being very diligent about companies, really understanding promoters and how businesses are built is the key to success. In the crossover arena, where you're investing both in listed and private equity, you have many traditional private equity firms like Multiples, Westbridge, Chris Capital, and SteadView. And I think here, having a great operational understanding of companies is important, because especially on the private side, you will have to help promoters and businesses make some kind of operational transformation. And lastly, on capital solutions, the market leader is a player like KKR, which goes to companies and promoters and says, if you need money, if you need capital for an acquisition or to expand or to even do a buyout, we'll be flexible about whether that capital comes in the form of debt, equity, or credit. So a flexible mindset and great relationships are critical to succeeding in the capital solutions space. Third, let's move on to two very interesting thought experiments on investing in risk management that are pertinent to the alternative equity space. So the first experiment that I wanted to share with you is how to make money in equities. And let's break this down. So if I look at the total return on a stock, it has three components. It has a growth in earnings, and I'm using earnings and cash flows interchangeably here. It has a change in multiple or a re-rating. And then finally, the smallest component is the dividend yield. Now, if I break this equation down a little bit further, the total return can be broken up as change in sales, an increase or decrease in margins, and a change in financial leverage, or the difference between growth in PAT and growth in EBITDA. These three components make up the change in earnings, and the last two components, which is the change in multiple and the dividend yield, remain the same. Okay, this is fairly textbook stuff. If you have done the CFA level 2, this would all be old stuff for you. But let's take this idea and expand it a little bit further. So we asked ourselves at different time horizons, if I had to deliver a 20% annualized return, which is what all good stock pickers aspire to deliver, what do I really need to happen to the business and to the stock for that outcome to take place? And we've worked down through this, and I won't run through these numbers in the interest of time, but the big takeaway from this is that the longer the time horizon, the greater the focus that needs to be on the growth in sales. The shorter the time horizon, the greater the emphasis on the change in multiple or the change in price. So this means that as you change your time horizon, your investment style your investment approach and what you place emphasis on will be different. Let's take this idea and build upon it, because we spoke about how changing the time horizon is actually one of the ways in which you break the shackles of equity investing and move into the world of alternatives. So we're going to talk about 3 different time horizons. What is the dominant factor and how you should invest if that was your time horizon. We'll also talk about what are the important risk management tools and metrics that you should look at. And again, this I want to tie back into material that we have covered in the CFA curriculum. So if you're investing in with a time horizon of a year or less, then the dominant factor is really the change in multiple, because businesses don't really change dramatically in a single year. And COVID-19 and 2020 is an exception to this rule. If you're investing with a 1-year time horizon, you're going to be more of a trader rather than an investor, and you're going to focus on macro factors like interest rates, policy announcements, as well as market microstructure and behavioral finance, factors like momentum, reversal, etc. And you're going to look at risk through the traditional lens of beta, volatility, value at risk, drawdowns, and the like. This is very much the domain of a trader. If you have a time horizon that is 1 to 3 years, like a mutual fund manager does, then your dominant factor is actually margin expansion. And you are largely looking at changes in profitability, changes in the business cycle, and focusing your fundamental analysis on that aspect. In terms of risk management, now the price that you pay and the price that you exit in terms of valuations becomes critical. And how you size positions, how you enter and exit stocks, how you are relative to the benchmark becomes critical in terms of risk management. Your active weights, your active share is also critical. But if you expand that time horizon to a 5-year time horizon, then the dominant factor becomes sales growth. And you're really investing in a company, in a stock, like a business owner. Factors that then become important include the size of opportunity, how happy your customers are, how happy your employees are, the ambitions and intentions of the owners and the promoters. And you're really looking for businesses that have high return on invested capital and can reinvest those cash flows at a high rate. As you extend the time horizon, the risk management becomes a lot more qualitative, whereas we saw at a 1-year time horizon, risk management is a lot more qualitative. And I think this framework is very important because, there are so many different voices in the equity market today. And this is a framework to unify people that are trading at the short end and really taking and building businesses and investing like a promoter at the long end, as well as mutual fund managers in the middle. So this is my first thought experiment. The second thought experiment is on how to make money by shorting companies. There is so much research about wealth creation, about how to find the next multi-bagger idea, but there is very, very little high quality research and thinking around how to short companies and to profit from pain. This is often viewed as a dark art, but I'm here to tell you today that it can be as rigorous as the work that has been done to identify winners in the stock market. So let's look at some interesting data that tells you that even though stock prices are fairly volatile, business performance of the underlying companies is very, very consistent. So here is a very interesting study of the 500 largest companies, the NSE 500, and done over the last 10 years. And what we did is that each year we took the 500 companies in the NSE 500 and broke them up into 4 quartiles of 125 stocks each by their return on equity. And then we looked at, in the subsequent year, where those same companies ranked in terms of quartiles, again on their return on equity. And what we saw is that if a company had a high return on equity, it tended to remain a high ROE company in the subsequent year. And if it was a low ROE company, then it continued to remain a poor quality business as time evolved. 68% of the companies fell along this no change diagonal, which is highlighted in black. And only about a third of businesses actually showed a relative improvement or degradation in business performance. So what this means is that when you invest in companies and use Bayes' theorem, the base rate of business performance is very, very important. We are often so fixated about looking at the future, but actually the past and studying history is very, very critical. The reality is that an HDFC Bank has been India's best banking franchise for the last 25 years, and it has been a wealth creator, even though everybody has known that over a period of time. So let's take this idea one step further. One of our insights is that Indian promoters, both good and bad, are actually horrible at managing capital structure. And what do I mean by that? If you break up the return on equity using the DuPont formula, which is again part of the CFA level 2 curriculum, return on equity can be written as the profit margin times asset turnover times financial leverage. The first two terms correspond to business quality. The last term corresponds to capital structure. And here, obviously, we have to do this analysis on excluding banks and NBFCs. So we looked at the 418 non-lending businesses in the NSE 500. And when I took the CFA curriculum and was studying finance in my undergrad, I learned the Modigliani and Miller theorem, which said that capital structure is independent of business profitability. It shouldn't matter what the profit margin or asset turnover of a company is when deciding financial leverage. At least that's what the textbook tells us is the case. But here's a very interesting study of these 418 companies. When you compare the return on invested capital or ROIC and the debt to equity of the same businesses. Okay. And what we found by looking at this analysis is that actually companies with very high profitability, like FMCG businesses, are, the businesses that have stable cash flows, the ones that should be taking debt to lever up because they can afford to do so, are the companies which are actually running debt free. And it is the cyclical businesses, the metal companies, the infra businesses, the capital goods companies that have low profitability. And they are the ones that are actually taking on the highest amount of debt. And hence, both for good companies and bad companies in India, balance sheet problems only magnify what is happening on the P&L statement. If I summarize the table above, you'll see that a third of businesses are actually falling in the high ROIC and low debt to equity bucket. These are ideal longs. And a third of businesses are following in the low ROIC and high debt to equity bucket, which are your ideal shorts. Finance theory tells you that this should be uniformly distributed across the grid. But in India, because promoters are so poor at managing capital structure, that isn't the case. So this gives you a great intellectual framework as to how to short companies. Lastly, before we turn over to Q&A, I wanted to share some interesting trends that we are seeing in the alternative equity universe today. The first is, there is a greater emphasis and use of performance fees because people are coming for performance. They don't want just index plus kind of performance in their alternative funds. There is also a bigger and bigger focus on fund manager and AMC co-investment or skin in the game. This is officially part of the regulation where AIF managers need to invest a minimum of 10 crores or 5% in their schemes. But increasingly, we see clients asking us about how much the fund manager has invested in the portfolio. There is a bigger and bigger emphasis on repeatable investment performance. And I think this is for those of you who are doing the CFA, that are in equity research or in fund management. I can't stress this enough. You have to be able to explain what you're doing and why that has a very strong economic foundation to it. There is less and less tolerance for individual brilliance and star fund managers. The fourth big trend that we see is something that I call the Amulization of fund managers. When I started my own PMS in 2009, Forefront Capital, it was difficult to get access to clients and difficult to reach out and raise AUM. But today, one or two people who are brilliant stock pickers can actually start up and scale very rapidly. This is true because information is being democratized by players like PMS Bazaar, PMS AIF World. There are new platforms like Smallcase, and large wealth management outfits are offering plug and play solutions for boutique fund managers. But at the same time, there is also a greater focus on operational and business risk. So if you're looking to start up, if you're looking to enter the alternative equity arena, you need to have good fund accounting software, good compliance, good operational risk metrics, etc. And the fact that many of these tools are available through the cloud and on a SaaS model makes it easier for even a startup to do operational and business risk very well. The sixth big trend that we see is a convergence of best practices from the mutual fund industry into alternatives. Whether it is scheme benchmarking, whether it is the direct plan, whether it is disclosure of commissions, a lot of the reforms that SEBI has done for the better in the mutual fund arena are coming to the PMS and AIF space. So one of my big learnings is that don't wait for the regulator to embrace best practices like performance reporting, like GIPS, etc. But take the leap ahead of the curve because it is good for business. It is the right thing to do as a CFA charter holder. And the last thing is the retailization of equity alternatives. When I started the first AIF in 2012, I was primarily going to Delhi, Bangalore, or raising money in Bombay. But today, and not in the COVID world, but pre-COVID, I was going to Jalandhar, Lucknow, Goa, uh, Latur, Cochin, Coimbatore, uh, you know, and so many other tier 2 and tier 3 cities to raise money from clients that are interested in equity alternatives. So this gives me a lot of hope. This gives me a lot of excitement that we're just getting started on one of the biggest ideas in equity fund management in all our careers. So with that, Srinivas, I would pause, would love to take questions. And if you liked what I said today and you want to continue the conversation, please hit me up on Twitter or on LinkedIn, or even drop me an email.
Yeah, I would recommend folks to just aspiring fund managers, especially in this group, to follow Nalin very closely to everything that he does. Thank you very much, Nalin, for a wonderful, wonderful presentation. There are loads of questions. So just one request. Uh, I mean, I would love to have you for 10 hours, but, see if it is possible to give a very short answer.
Sure.
Yeah. So first off, you've already covered it in many ways. Why do you think AIF space has grown? Is it unconstrained? I mean, what are the reasons? Why is it growing so rapidly?
Right. So it's very simple, Srinivas. An AIF combines the operational ease of a mutual fund with the investment flexibility of a PMS. The operational ease of a mutual fund means a simple 2-page form and a KYC, and you just get started. You're investing in a single portfolio, with the units and NAV, everything is standardized. But at the same time, you can take leverage, you can short, you can hold cash, you can be invested in different sectors. There is complete investment freedom. So the best of both worlds is leading to super rapid growth.
And you don't have to have any benchmarks, right?
No, you do need to have a benchmark, both
Okay.
market linked benchmark,
Okay.
as well as there is mandatory peer level benchmarking by SEBI, by CRISIL.
Right. Right. And PMS, you're thinking it's a little bit cumbersome, is it? Or
Because in PMS, you need to open a bank account, you need to open a demat account.
okay.
Every portfolio is distinct. Even though people run a model portfolio, there are operational challenges.
Right. So these were questions, by the way, from Raj Mehta. I couldn't see him today. He works at PPFAS. But let me move on quickly to many, many other questions. Uh, we, are, we have Parul who's asking, you showed a very nice chart on holding periods versus active share. And you also mentioned that the UK has got a 50% norm. Uh, Parul's question is there a temporal trend in holding periods as well as active shares?
No, Srinivas, this is held true. Parul, this is held true over a period of time. The active share has hovered around 30 to 35%, and the holding period has hovered between 1 to 1.5 years.
You mentioned about the constraints and nicely explained how making it unconstrained actually helps. I mean, that is basic 101 investment theory, that the lesser the constraint, the better the rewards. But what about geographic diversification?
Right. So Srinivas, that is also a very, very important element of being unconstrained. I advise everybody to have at least 10 to 15% of their financial portfolio in international equities. But when we look at it domestically, Srinivas, the alternative industry can't invest overseas.
Right. So, but the mutual funds have got a window. Does that window also apply for PMS from an understanding perspective?
No, it doesn't apply for PMS and AIF.
It doesn't. Okay. Got
Right.
it.
And
Right.
by the way, Raj at PPFAS has done a fantastic job doing this.
Right. Okay. Ashish Khatri is wanted to know, about value companies and why would anyone invest with such a long time horizon in the value companies? I don't know. I think he's got it mixed up. He's saying that maybe I've not understood his question. The sales doesn't grow very much in value companies. The other point he wanted to make is long-term investment and akin to investing in only growth companies. So if you could quickly in one minute demystify that, please.
Right. So 2 points, Ashish. First is that the traditional definition of value has changed from the days of Ben Graham, where we was looking at liquidation value, to maybe people that were looking at price to book 20, 25 years ago, to today buying cash flows at a discount to intrinsic value. So the definition of value itself has evolved uh, and will continue to evolve. Uh, my only point is that the longer the time horizon that you have for a stock, the greater the emphasis that you need to have on sales growth as the driver of performance.
Right.
If you run a business for 10 years, you can't cut costs or do financial engineering and create anything of substance. You have to gain customers, you have to grow sales, and everything else follows from there.
Thanks. Pranav Bhavsar, man from Gujarat, is asking, in a flows-driven environment, how do you manage your risk on the short side?
Right. It's a good question, Pranav. Risk management is very critical when you're shorting companies. Uh, Typically, on the long portfolio, you can operate like a sniper in the sense that you can have a concentrated portfolio, but on the short side, you need to have more of a shotgun approach where you operate with a more diversified basket of names because accidents do happen. And when you're shorting and accidents happen, it pains a lot more.
Bhavesh has a question. Pranav, again, we are going back to AIF definitions. Uh, do derivatives, taxation of derivatives, hamper the growth of category 3 AIFs?
So it is a misnomer that derivative taxation is actually holding back the growth of category 3 AIFs. About 70% of category 3 AIFs are actually long only portfolios and are not doing any derivatives whatsoever. Actually, 80%. The only people who are using derivatives are the long short players, of which out of that 10,000 odd crores in long short, Pranav, roughly about 6 to 7,000 crores is in equity oriented long short funds, which have a good solution for derivative taxation, and maybe 2 to 3,000 crores of AUM in debt oriented long short funds are challenged by this law. We don't have time to go into this in detail, but you can obviously hit me up on social media or on email, and I'm happy to explain this in more depth for you.
Yeah, follow Nalin on Twitter and give credit to all his hard work as well as his real genius. Uh, Kartikeya Agarwal is asking, finding high ROC companies is well and good, but these generally trade at a very high PE. So do you look at other measures as well? And what are those?
Right. So Karthikeya, when I look at something with a 5-year horizon, valuations are important, but what's much more important are the qualitative factors, people, ESG, customer satisfaction, um, you know, and these are the ingredients that ultimately create ROCE. ROCE is just an outcome of having great products, great customers, and really happy and engaged employees.
Right. I wanted to, move, to a different set of questions. Nalin, what are some of the biggest worries that you personally face? Obviously, you've been very successful year after year, winning awards. Uh, what are some of the tricks and tools maybe that you're using, and you may want to share with others?
So actually, I don't worry at all, Srinivas. And you can tell that I barely have any gray hair. Um, you know, and the reason I don't worry is because we spend so much time doing simple stuff, but things that are foundationally sound. And I think this is, for all CFA charter holders, take the curriculum very, very seriously because the foundational work is what will carry you through your entire career.
Right. So how did you think, when the markets dropped to a low in March, what was the thinking, and how did you, talk with your team, and what happened then? Can you share with us?
Right. So Srinivas, I've lived through 2008. I was working on Wall Street, um, you know, and I had a front row seat on the collapse of Lehman Brothers and, um, you know, uh, and Bear Stearns. So I wasn't too worried. We did stress tests on our portfolios, uh, you know, and we said let's just hold on to understand if businesses can survive this period. Obviously, nobody knew what would happen in March, so we were just focused on survival, uh, and the portfolio came out with flying colors on the stress test, and we were okay. Honestly, I was more focused about the health and safety of my team. I wanted to make sure that everybody had enough food at home, uh, everything was okay on that front, and that everybody was safe and healthy.
Right. Great. So you mentioned about stress tests. What were the tools? Do you just use Excel, or do you have any specific tools to do stress tests?
Right. So Srinivas, you know, COVID-19 is actually without precedent because it's the first time that uh, incomes, balance sheets, and health were all challenged. Okay. So there was no playbook for this, unlike previous financial crisis. We did 3 stress tests that we thought would cause businesses to fail in COVID. The first is having high debt. Okay. The second is having high fixed costs as a percentage of sales. And the third is having high working capital.
Right.
These are the 3 things that could kill you.
Right.
Interest payments could kill you. High fixed costs because you didn't know how long things would be shut for could kill you. And then having money stuck in inventory or with customers could also kill you because that would mean loss of cash flow.
Right. Now you mentioned you have a 5-year horizon, right? And how do you do performance measurement as well as attribution? How do you get conviction? I know that you have a set of foundational themes for everything that you do, but do you see whether they are coming along, and what times do you measure them? What are some of the concepts there?
Right. So Srinivas, we do the traditional portfolio attribution analytics as well. Please don't get me wrong. We look at contributors, detractors, active share, performance versus the benchmark, volatility, drawdown, etc. So that I think is the standard, though that is the standard for any equity fund manager today. Um, but then in our communication and in our evaluation, we also track earnings, we track product launches, we track customer uh, satisfaction and other such qualitative factors.
Right. So, any specific tools you mentioned? All these aspects. So, are you using the traditional market data tools that are available? What would you advise for startup fund managers in this group?
Right. So I think the portfolio analytics on Bloomberg are very useful, but actually you don't. If you're a startup fund manager, you don't need that. You can do it all in Excel also.
Right. Coming to your hiring and promoting decisions, uh, I hope you have not had to fire anyone, or if you had, can you tell
No,
some
no, we
stories?
haven't.
Okay,
We don't fire people, Srinivas. I'm a very kind boss. And, we hire people very, very carefully. And, we are very, very thoughtful about who we bring on board. In fact, we have somebody on this call who will join our team shortly. So we are hiring. And if you loved what we say, please reach out, to me on that front as well.
yeah, if you can give a 1 minute, there's lots of level 3 CFAs as well as our own members. Can you give a 1 minute advice on some of the lacuna that you see in the interviews who come and meet you? This is not a career webinar, but just for the benefit of people, can you give a 1 minute advice if that's at all possible?
So I think, Srinivas, I get maybe 4 to 5 job requests on LinkedIn a day. But very few of them are actually thoughtful. Very few people have actually taken the time to study what we do, or, maybe share an insight that is interesting. A lot of it is spray and pray. So I know that a lot of CFA charter holders are looking for opportunities today, but when you reach out on LinkedIn, reach out in a thoughtful manner. It may take longer, but your conversion rate will be a lot higher.
Right. What about new age technologies, Nalin? I mean, there's big data, machine learning. We've been talking with people; they use this a lot. What is your take on this?
So Srinivas, that is very useful when you shorten the time horizon. So when you're doing some kind of high frequency trading or quant analysis, uh, but in our alternative funds, we don't use any of that, and we don't intend to use it because our time horizons are longer.
Right. So I wanted to, from you, I wanted to understand the role of skill and luck in this business, and the opportunity for, or can everybody a fund manager? Perhaps not, right? So how do you see that emerging? For the bulk of the charter holder audience over here, in the context
Right.
of skill
So
and luck.
obviously, Srinivas, over a very short time, luck is a dominant factor. You know, even the best fund manager can have a bad month, a bad quarter, a bad year. But as time goes on, uh, skill shines through, and process shines through. So I think the only way to separate luck from skill is to actually have a long innings in one place and do one thing. I've actually, in 16 years of working, Srinivas, I I've started at Goldman. I started a company after that, and then I sold the business to Edelweiss. So really only 2 job changes, or if you actually count it, only 1 job change in 16 years.
No, that's fantastic. As you say, you have to run marathons and run 1 kilometer 42 times. Is that right?
Yes.
Right. On that note, thank you so very much, Nalin. Folks, please see if you can reach out to Nalin and follow him. There's a lot to learn from Nalin. Obviously, he writes from time and again on LinkedIn as well. Very thoughtful notes he puts on LinkedIn. Nalin, I hope you write for the CFA Institute Enterprising Investor blog site as well, and I hope
We
you
would love to do
encourage
that.
people to write in the Financial Analyst Journal. Not a single Indian has written there. Lastly, folks, wanted to remind that we've got our annual flagship event, the India Investment Conference on 29, 30, 31. Excellent list of speakers there, like Nalin. And we also got a portfolio management workshop after that. So see you then and see you there. Thank you so very much for attending this, and really very grateful to you, Nalin.
Thank you, Srinivas. Thank you to everybody today.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.